So tell me about your job.
So my job is working for our state's domestic violence slash sexual assault hotline, as well as my state's PREA hotline. So if someone who's in federal prison wants to report rape or if they were sexually assaulted in any way, they would call our hotline and we would just take down their report. And then we would either send it over to their designated investigation center, or if it was like not that, then we would just send it over to OSI, which is Office of Special Investigations, if they talk about like if their commissary wasn't done, if they haven't gotten their medications or anything like that. But that's the basis for at least the PREA hotline. Our state's DVSA hotline is essentially we'll have people call in and we always ask, this is the state's domestic and sexual violence hotline. Are you in a safe place to talk? And they will explain kind of like their situations like, oh, I need services for shelter. And so we go, okay. And it was like, okay, what city and county are you calling from? And we look up on like a sheet because the way our state works is if a person is calling in from a particular county, then that county is responsible for their situation. They're responsible to help them get the services that they need. And so I would give the person a choice whether or not if you want me to transfer you over, you can call them yourself. But at least 9 times out of 10, I would be the one transferring them over to like an organization, being like, hey, this person's looking for shelter. Can you help them out?
Right. And you work with privately owned organizations like nonprofits.
Yeah, so a lot of the nonprofits in the area, some for the state's district attorney's office, family court offices, because a lot of the times with the family court, they have domestic violence advocates or sexual violence advocates already in place to help survivors out with what they need.
Right. And how old are you, if I may ask?
I'm actually 22, but I actually started this job when I was around 21 years old. I just got out of college and I was trying to look for a job that's kind of like psychology field, and I found this job placement. I'm like, oh, this is kind of cool. I always was aware that domestic violence and sexual violence was a thing. One of my close friends actually went through a sexual violence situation in college. So like I understood, like I was aware of certain things, but I didn't know like how in depth it was, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because with domestic violence, it's not just physical, it could be emotional, financial, academic abuse, psychological abuse. It could be like a number of different things.
For someone who started a year ago and is 22, you are surprisingly well educated on such a complex topic.
Surprisingly enough, yeah, because we get training done for both of them. For like our state's DVSA, we have to do like a several hour long training of like how to talk to the person. Like you don't ask why questions, especially when you're talking to like someone who just said, I was just raped.
Mm.
You don't ask why, you just say, okay, how can I best help you at this time? And you can refer them to rape crisis centers because each county in any state would have a rape crisis center so that person can go to and get tested if they have picked up anything or get evidence for their perpetrator to if they want to file a court order against that person, so that way they have evidence for that person, like if they were ever to go to court, this is the evidence that I provided.
Right. And your job is to make sure that someone who is in potentially the worst day of their life feels safe going through a very important process.
Exactly, because the way that our states does it is we provide emotional support to survivors that call in. So I've had someone like call on the line saying, "Hey, I was just raped. I'm not sure what to do." Like one of the examples that I always use is I had a guy call in on the line saying, "Hey, I wasn't sure if I was raped or not. I got drugged and I'm not really sure what to do." And I'm like, of course, I go, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry." It's like, "Are you okay? Is there anything I can help you with?" He goes, "Yeah, I'm fine, but I'm just like very traumatized by the event." He was like, "I'm not sure if I was raped or not, so I don't know what to do." And the way that we have to do it is we can't tell people what to do because it has to be from them as self advocacy. And so I encouraged him just to go to a rape crisis center to be on the safe side, because I'd rather be safe and sorry regardless of any situation, to make sure that they're okay. And if it was that, then where to go from there.
So I guess that's something that people may notice right away is you said a guy. How many of the people that call in are male?
Pretty a low percentage. We mostly get male callers on the PREA hotline, which is the incarcerated individuals, because at least 9 times out of 10, it's a guy who's calling in or they identify themselves as male. But on the sexual assault DV hotline, it's very few and far between. Like, there are male callers that come in, but the majority of time it's mostly women. But if a male caller comes down, we like treat them like any survivor just to give them the services that they need, because regardless if you're like male, female, non-binary, you deserve to get help with your DV situation or sexual violence situation. Like, you deserve to get the help that you need, regardless of what you identify as.
Right. Does this job ever get to you?
It does at times, absolutely. Like some of the cases I was on, because we also have a text line too for the DV, and I was on a text with a 12-year-old girl, and she was saying that she was sexually abused by her father. And my first initial thought, because I've worked with kids in the past at a daycare, and so I was like texting her on the line, it's like, how old are you? It's like, is everything okay? Just trying like to get to know her personally a little bit. Because if it's a young child using the text line, then it's most likely a last resort for them. So you want to best help them in that scenario.
Right.
So I was texting her, well, how old are you? And she was kind of also adding on there, my name is Heather. I'm 12. My favorite subject is math. And I'm like, okay, cool. My name is Calico. I'm 22 and my favorite subject is science. Kind of just try to have at least some small bond. Like, I would probably never going to see this person face to face, but even if it's just like a small connecting piece with like a school subject, that definitely helps.
So building rapport with someone before you ask them about these things can help a lot.
Absolutely. The better you can like get a person to either calm down if they're very upset or try to get connected with the person, the better chance is that person is going to listen and be able to pick up like, hey, here are some services out there that's available for you to have.
And when you get these people calling in, do you ever have to redirect them to like 911 because they're still active danger?
With 911, it's a little bit weird, I guess, to describe it as. Like, yes, we can transfer them to 911 if they are like in immediate danger and they call us instead of calling them, which is fine. But if they say like they're in immediate danger, but the abusing party is not in the building, we would always suggest to them, if it happens, call 911 and ask for a domestic violence advocate.
Right.
That's usually the way that we go down. It's like domestic violence or sexual violence. We always tell them, ask for an advocate, and they can help better with their situation and then help make a report against that person.
So then having someone who is specially trained in this area is always the most important part.
Absolutely, because of the fact that a lot of police officers, especially in like depending on the state, a lot of the times they don't take domestic violence or sexual violence all too seriously. So it's like, oh, you're just having a scuffle with your boyfriend. No, it's literally domestic violence. Why aren't you getting that big picture? So there always should be one person on a police staff who is trained to help in domestic violence or sexual violence scenarios, because you're going to need that person who has an open ear to help that person at the end of the day.
And would you be that person, for instance, if you were to do that job? Do you have that training?
Like, I only work for the hotline, so I don't work directly with a police station, so it's just for the states, but we can refer them to domestic violence advocates through their local police station. But oftentimes, like, the main purpose is to go through a DV program, because they do have police advocates there, because a lot of the times when someone calls in, they're too scared to talk to the police because of the fact that a lot of the times they don't take it seriously. So we find a program that has police advocacy. So I'll refer them over to them so that way they can help with talking with the local police.
If you could choose any other job, what kind of job would you choose? Like, would you choose another job or would you choose to stay at yours, even with all the trauma and stuff you have to go through?
Like, I'm currently going to school for social work. I got accepted to a master's program. It's like I got my taste of working with a DV program in my state, and I realized that's not the population I want to get into, because From like experience, like I realized that's not the population I exactly want to get into. Like I do want to work with people who have trauma, but not in that particular field. Like I'm glad I was able to work with these individuals and help them get the help that they need, but just for my own mental health and for my own safety, it is like I don't feel that I can do this for the rest of my life, basically.
Good question. See, I knew you could do it.
And also too, like there's a lot of burnout with the hotlines because of the fact that with how our staff works. Like a good example I use for like burnout is like I had someone call in last year who, and I'm gonna preface this like this is kind of a trigger warning. I had a caller come in, and the way I do is like I was sitting at my desk, I was typing up a report. My coworker was in kind of like the upper area talking with my supervisor because she ended up staying pretty late at night, and I get the call from the DV hotline. I'm like, okay, this is the state's DV sexual assault. And before I even have time to finish, I hear a guy just sobbing and screaming on the other line, I just killed my wife. And I'm just sitting there going, what? Because I was a little bit put off by it. And he was describing me how he had an argument with his wife and it escalated to him stabbing his wife 18 times. And he was crying and sobbing on the other line. And I'm like, and he asked me, is this a recorded line? And I had to tell him, no, it wasn't. So he goes into very graphic detail. Like, I would not wish this on anyone else. So internally, I am freaking out because I've never had this happen. But externally, I'm just like, okay, I have to keep calm. Let me get some information from this guy. Maybe I can try to get this to the police or something. So I kind of ask him, like, try to talk with him a little bit. But he's screaming, I just killed my wife. There's so much blood everywhere. And at some point, I'm just trying to flag down my coworker who's down the hall, but she's very busy talking with our supervisor. So I'm just kind of waving her down, listening to this guy. And as I'm listening to him, the vocal change from I'm so upset that I just killed my wife to accepting the fact that he killed his wife. And then finally, apathetic and laughing about it. And that is something that I do not wish on anybody whatsoever because, like, how intense it was. So I ended up finally reaching my coworker. I tell her, grab the supervisor right now. I don't know what to do. And as she goes up, I hear him on the phone saying, like, oh, I don't know what I'm going to do with my kids. Because apparently he had 2 kids in the home. And of course, my maternal instincts kick in. Like, I don't have kids, but I have very younger cousins that I'm very protective of. And I'm just like, don't do it. Like, whatever you're going to do, just straight up, just don't do that. Because you're going to be a terrible father if you kill your kids. And so as soon as I say that, my supervisor comes down. I'm still talking with the guy, but I'm writing little notes to my supervisor saying, I don't know what to do. I'm freaking out. I'm trying not to cry because it was so intensive how it was. And at some point, he asked for my name. And normally with the hotlines, it depends on the situation, whether if you want to give your real name or a fake name. I just gave a fake name because I just felt so uncomfortable. And so I gave him my fake name. And he asked me, do you want me to send you pictures of the dead body? And I'm like, I don't have a phone that you can send pictures of, basically. And at some point, I just start slowly like shutting down during this conversation. And my supervisor ends up taking it over and she tells me, go upstairs, go chill.
Mm.
And I go upstairs and I just start bawling my eyes out because of the fact that I had to listen to that. So I cry. It gets to the end of my shift. I go home. And the next day I go into work because I wasn't really sure what else to do at that point because I just felt so numb. And the really weird part about it is I was never debriefed afterward after that. I was never sat down and like fully talked to about what happened. And some of these calls can get that intensive. Like this was like an extremely rare time it was that intensive. And I was never debriefed on that. Like I'm still worried that it actually did happen in real life, because sometimes we'll get people who have like very severe mental health issues and they call in and they kind of start rambling, so you just kind of sit there and listen. I wasn't sure if this guy was serious, and I wasn't sure if he actually did or not, and that still kind of scares me to this day, to be honest. And like some of the stuff like this, like we've had people talk about rape cases, and we're sometimes talked to about it, but the majority of time we're only talked about like how we put our reporting into the system. And that is something that a lot of people don't realize with it, because on the other line, like you're listening to stories, you're sending them to organizations, and you're thinking you're going to do a good job. You're trying to get them the help that they need, but it can get extremely intensive at times. And sometimes, like I've seen this in some of my coworkers, they become very numb to this because of how intensive these stories can be. It can make a person become very apathetic very quickly.
Mm. Do you feel like it's worth going through that to help these people?
At times, yeah, because of the fact that a lot of people don't know where to turn to. A lot of people think, oh, I can just go to my local like DSS and get the help that I need. And a lot of the times, DSS is very funky in how like they help people. Sometimes they'll accept people if they're like reach like a certain financial degree, or they won't accept people because like, oh, you're too mentally ill. Like that's the excuse that I
Ugh.
got from a lot of DSS services, like this person's too mentally ill. And I'm just thinking to myself, are you effing kidding me? Like these people need help. And so like even if it's just like a small thing, even if like I talk to a person and be like, hey, here are some services out to help you, there's someone willing to listen, there's someone who is going to help you regardless of your situation, and regardless what you identify as, and regardless of what you have, like there are people to help you. Like we have this one woman who keeps calling our hotline. I'm gonna call her Robin for this. And she calls the hotline and she goes, hi buddy. I'm like, hey buddy, how the hell are you? And she has very severe mental health issues. She was abused when she was a child. It's still on an ongoing situation. And she always calls our hotline before she transfers to the DV program, because she finds it comforting just to hear someone who doesn't work for that DV program. And so that way she calms down, and then we're like transferring her over. And at the end of the day, like she still gets the help that she needs, but she always still calls us to be like, hey, here's an update to my situation. It's like, oh, that's awesome, Robin. I'm happy for you.
Mm.
Like there are some good stories that come out of it, and some of them can be extremely intensive. Sometimes we'll get people who are just don't really want services, but just want to talk. And that's perfectly fine. Like if you just want to just like talk about what happened, then afterward, if you want to have services, that's fine. Or if you just want to talk about it, that's completely fine too. That's what the hotline is for.
You know, you're doing a lot of good. Like a lot of good.
It can get very intensive. And that's just the DV sexual assault hotline. Like the PREA hotline, best way I can describe it is like a flip of a coin call, because sometimes you'll get people who are saying, I was just groped by a correctional officer, and that sort of thing needs to be reported to the PREA investigation. So if they were groped or they were assaulted in any way, it would have to go to that particular center. Or sometimes on the other chance, they'll be like, hey, I didn't get my commissary for this day. And we have to tell them, this is not the hotline for that. You would have to call Office of Special Investigations for that, and here's the number for there. One of the weird things with the PREA one is I never realized I would become a call girl for the PREA hotline. And I'm being dead serious on that, because we'll get people on the hotline, and it's always a male, and they will just start doing it on the
Oh my
hotline.
god.
Yeah. We'll hear that. We'll hear people moaning on the line. And usually for that, because our boss says just hang up as soon as that happens and record the time. And when I first started out with this, we would have people who would be on it for like an hour long doing it. They would pick up, you would hear the sound, hang up, pick up, hear the sound, hang up, pick up, hear the sound, hang up. This would be for about an hour.
Ugh.
And to keep this in mind too, when you call the PREA hotline, it's a free call for a lot of the prisons. And a lot of the times when someone needs to like call a family member, you have to pay to call out. But like if someone is like working with like PREA or Office of Special Investigations, then that's a free call. And so they use that free call in very disgusting manners. Like, we do get people on there who genuinely need help. Like, the one example that I like using, we're going to call him Jerry. He calls the hotline, and I'm on the phone with him for the 30 minutes a lot of time. And he's talking to me about his situation. He's saying that he is being harassed by a lot of the inmates. And I asked him, well, what sort of like coping mechanisms do you use to kind of calm down so you're not fighting anybody or you're arguing with anybody? And as I'm starting to talk with him, because he's telling me about his family, he's telling me he's getting out in a couple of months, which is like, I'm proud of you, Jerry. That's awesome. And then towards the end of the call, he tells me, hey, fake name, thanks for listening to it. You actually helped me because I was debating on committing suicide, but you helped me through that. And that kind of took me back a little bit, like, oh, okay. And then I just kind of accept it. And I'm like, well, I'm glad I was able to help. If you need to call back again, the hotline is open from these hours. You can call again and talk. Like, some of those, like, kind of, like, catch you off guard at times.
Yeah.
And you'll get, like, some stories like that. Like, you'll get people, like, who are, like, thanking you for your service in the prisons. We had this one guy who actually just calls in for the holidays, just saying, hey, Merry Christmas, hey, Happy New Year.
Aw.
He was just being a very sweet guy. Like, some of them are actually, like, very, very friendly individuals. Like, they just want someone to talk to. One funny story that I have with it is I get a call from the PREA hotline. I'm like, hey, PREA hotline. And before I finish, she goes, my girlfriend hung up on me. And I'm like, what? She goes, I was our anniversary and I wanted to sing her a song for our anniversary, but she hung up before I could do it. Can I sing to you? And technically not supposed to, because it was a very slow day that day. And I'm just looking at my watch going, okay, you got a minute, go. And he starts singing some 60s or 70s love song. Next thing I hear, he gets, hey guys, come here. There's like a group of like 4 of them singing a 4-part harmony to me on the line. And I'm just kind of like jamming out to it a little bit in the office because it's like, just make someone's day. It's like, yeah, it's for a minute, but if you make someone's day at the end of the day, then it matters a lot.
Yeah, that's really sweet.
Yeah, because majority of the time, like, we'll get actual callers from the DVSA. Like, we do get real callers from the PREA one, but the way that we go with the PREA is that we have to ask, like, where it happened, when it happened. We got to get your DIN number. And if it was an officer, who was the officer that did it? If it was an inmate, who was the inmate that did it? Because between the two, the DV one, we just give emotional support and refer people, whereas the PREA, like, we give emotional support, but we also have to take down exactly what happened. So when we send it over to Office of Investigations, they're like, okay, we'll check the cameras and just kind of confirm what happened during that time.
Mm.
I get really flustered talking about it because a lot of the time we're told we can't really talk about like sort of stories like in full depth, like, which is understandable because of the fact like how the job is and how confidentiality works. And being able kind of like to talk about this is also kind of very therapeutic because sometimes you just need to like talk with someone about it. And a lot of the time either you talk with your therapist, you talk with friends who are similar in that field. We try to keep it like an open environment there with a lot of my coworkers because one of my supervisors, Carrie, she was an ex-federal correctional officer. And so during our PREA training, we're like told like how pat frisks work, which is basically like checking to see if there's no illegal stuff on the person. So when someone with the PREA hotline says I was groped, we always have to ask, was it during a pat frisk? Because a lot of the time, because the procedure is like very invasive, some individuals can get triggered by it. Like if they were sexually abused in the past, the pat frisk, it can traumatize them. Like if they need to call the hotline to get mental health services, we try to encourage them to do that so that way they can talk about it. And then the next time they get pat frisk, they're not going to do anything. They're just checking to see if you have any contraband on you, basically.
What's like the balance of the 2 different lines?
Depends on like the week because some days the maximum calls I've gotten in a single day are 20 calls. And that could be a mix between the PREA and the DV hotline. Some days we'll get like no DV and solely like PREA hotline. And then sometimes we'll get like only PREA and like no domestic violence. But at least around 70% of it is DV or sexual assault. And then the other 30% is PREA hotlines. It's like a mixed bag in between the two because we do have callers from the PREA who repeat reporters. They'll keep calling in with a different report. And majority of the time, it's actually a very serious case. But a lot of the times, it's just the person called yesterday and they're like, where's my report? I'm like, it takes around 2 to 3 weeks for a lot of these things to be investigated by, which discourages a lot of people. And so we'll get people who are angrily calling on the line. I haven't heard anyone from the PREA Center. I haven't heard anyone from Special Investigations. Why is it taking so long? And a lot of the time, we can't give an answer for that because we're just the hotline at the end of the day. Yes, we do like send the reports out, but we don't know what happens afterward. We just send the reports out. We always tell them like it's going to be 2 to 3 weeks. We're sorry that it's an inconvenience for you. We're sorry that you're angry about this, because it's very justified anger if someone calls in with an actual rape case and they haven't seen a therapist in 2 3 weeks. Like they have every right to be angry about that. But if it's someone asking where the hell is my therapist, we can't give an answer for them. That's kind of the sad part about it too. It's just like we're just the call center. We're just the people who send the reports out, give emotional support. That's really about it.
Yeah. When I was talking with the 911 operator for that video, a lot of the difficulty of the job that he described was feeling powerless to help. Do you ever feel that?
Definitely with the call I talked about previously with the murder one, I definitely felt kind of powerless for that. But at the end of the day, with the DV and SA hotline, it's up to the survivor to look for the services. We can encourage them to go and talk to these people, or we can transfer them directly. But it's honestly up to the survivor what they want to do at the end of the day. Like it sucks at times because some people will just do not listen. Like we'll give like a list of services and they're like, no, I already called them. No, I already called them. No, I already called them. It's like, did you call them or did you just call them and they didn't give you what you wanted so you hung up? Because some services do more than others. So the best way to do it is to try to refer them to a service that has what they're looking for. So like financial, housing, job placement, for schooling for kids, stuff like that.
Yeah. Are you proud of the work you've done?
Honestly, yeah. I'm proud that I was able to help these people out because we do get callers who, after we're done with them, they're like, thank you so much. Thank you for listening. Because a lot of survivors just want people to listen to them at the end of the day. Because when domestic violence gets talked about, a lot of the times they're taken as a joke, basically.
Right.
Kind of like the joke about how marriage is kind of like you getting arrested, when some relationships are literally like that. And especially in sexual assault situations too, because when we have guys call in, sometimes it's not taken seriously because, oh, it's a guy, like the stereotype, they can't get raped type thing, which is honestly bullshit to me. It's really bullshit.
Yeah.
But I am proud that I was able to help people. I am happy that I'm able to help people at the end of the day. And sometimes, like, I wish I could do more for them working with the hotline, but I'm still happy that I'm just being able to be like, hey, there's people out there to listen. I'm here to listen. If you want to call back and just get emotional support, our hotline is 24 hours. So if you want to call at any time, you can. We're here to help you.
That is very honorable work.
Because, like, I'll tell stories about this, and a lot of people don't believe me when I say, like, this person, with the PREA ones, with the call girl stuff, they're kind of shocked by it. But after like a year working on it, you become just kind of numb to it. So when that person does it, we just hang up and I tell one of my male coworkers, hey, this person's doing inappropriate. Can you take the calls when they come in? They're like, yeah, sure.
That'll stop them, huh?
Yeah. Yeah, because like they're always looking for a female voice. I was talking with one of my coworkers about this too, because some people get them more than others. Me especially, I got them a lot. And I asked my coworker at one point, and they're like, "Oh yeah, you just have a very attractive voice." And I'm just sitting there going, "That explains a lot, but why did you have to say that?"
Oh.
I'm like the youngest person on their staff too, so like young voice, yeah.
Ugh.
At the end of the day, it's the calls are there for a reason. Like with the PREA one is there so that way people can get like the help they need a lot of the time. Like it is very frustrating when like you're in a prison and you're not getting the help that you need fast enough, and so the stuff still keeps happening, or like a lot of the harassment keeps happening, and we just keep encouraging them to like, whenever it happens, just call the hotline. Just tell us what happened. We will put it in the report. We will send it to OSI. We will send it to the PREA center. Just tell us what happened. And you do get a lot of burnout from it too a lot of the time. So it's good to have self-care aspects and to talk with coworkers. I have a hard time getting over things and I dwell on things a lot. And that's probably why I got burnt out so quickly, is because I dwelled on it a lot. And so I talked with Carrie, who's the head of the PREA one, and she goes, just let it get through your system and just leave it at work at the end of the day. And even my dad kind of encouraged that too, because he works in the mental health field. Just like leave the stuff at work, because if you take it home with you, then it's gonna just like mess everything up at home.
Right. Yeah, taking on the burdens of dozens of people every week as a job must get to you when you have to deal with your own stuff too, huh?
Yeah. Even like some of the callers who are also like my age or younger too, will have some people call in, and sometimes you kind of like relate it to yourself. I tried not to. I used to do it when I was starting out, like relating it to yourself, and it's like, no, 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 no. This is an individual person who you're trying to help with.
Mm.
And we'll get like people who are like the older population. We'll get people who are calling on behalf of a child, if it's someone's guardian, like, what do I do? Scenarios. And we'll like look on the list. If it's child protective services, we'll give them the number for that. If it's just they need to get shelter or they need help, here are services that can help with specifically like kids or teens.
Mm. So you're kind of the one to go to for all the resources, right?
Basically, yeah, like sometimes like they are like a Google search away, but if people don't have internet, but they have like a phone system, they can call in and be like, "Hey, I'm looking for like services for shelter." And we're like, "Okay, if you're in like a city area, you'll have more services in like the city areas, whereas a rural area, you'll have like one or two." It does kind of suck a little bit because there is DV in all aspects, whether it's like urban, rural, upper class, lower class, whatever. Like domestic violence happens to everybody.
Universal human evil.
Yeah. And the people who do these things are just like very, very messed up individuals who honestly think that this is the way to treat their partner, and it's very disgusting. The stories I hear is just like how they treat their partners. It's like I feel sorry for the survivors.
You're making their life either better or giving them the path to make it better.
Yeah, like I'll even have people who are just like, I don't want to commit suicide. And the one thing we're encouraged to do, like always give them choices. So that way they have a power. Even if it's like a small thing like a choice, it's still power that they can use. And so sometimes I'll ask, do you want to talk with me or do you want to talk with more of like a professional stuff? And sometimes it's a professional, and then other times they'll just talk with me and they'll just vent to me about like what happened. And I won't really say anything like unless they ask me like a question, and I just kind of listen to them because a lot of the time they just need someone to listen to at the end of the day. And at the same time too, it's like if they choose like to say I was assaulted or I'm going through a DV situation to someone, take that seriously. Take it seriously regardless of whatever. Just take the story seriously and get them the help that they need.
And that's true of everyone. If someone says that to you, listen to it.
Sometimes they just don't want to hear, they're just blocking out of their head. It's like, no, if someone is going to you and telling you I was assaulted, that means that they trust you enough to be comfortable with talking to you, and they find you a safe person to go to because they believe you're going to get them the help that they need. Or you can encourage them to be like, here, let's sit down together, I can call this hotline and we can look for services together.
Right. Well, I'm so glad that the person doing this job has a personality like you who is compassionate and willing to listen to these things. Because not everyone has the mindset for this.
And you have to have the mindset when you're going into this. Like, yes, you can become numb to a lot of this stuff, but you still have to have compassion for it, especially even with like with the PREA hotlines. Yes, some of the calls that do come in are very gross with people like doing it on the phone, but the people who actually call the hotline for its intended purposes, then you still listen to them at the end of the day. You still want to make sure that they're safe, they're okay, and you're listening to them and just making sure that they're safe.
And it sounds like you're doing a very good job.
I'm going to my grad school, so I'm probably stopping it. But if I still continue with the per diem stuff, I'll definitely still continue it. But like, it's very hard for me to talk about this type of stuff with people who like don't know, because it's how it can be very intense when you're actually listening to people. And sometimes with like a lot of people who work as callers, like they need to talk with either coworkers or people just to kind of like just talk about it too, because a lot of the time like they get burnt out, they get very emotional, like sometimes it hits too close to home for a lot of people.
Well, it sounds like you're definitely the person for the job. And no matter what you end up doing as you get your degree and after you get your degree, I'm certain that it will help people, because that sounds like the goal that you have above all else. And that is very respectable.
I appreciate you giving me the time to talk about this, so thank you for that.
Of course. Now, before we end, I want to show you something because you just tried VR for the first time. I'm going to give you a hug. Ready?
Yeah. Oh. Oh. Actual virtual hug. I never had that.
Indeed.
Tell me a story, I wanna hear it. You might think it's boring.